Wonderful. Well, everybody, if I have not met you before or been in contact with you, my name is Shayna Lang. I am the Community Engagement Coordinator for IN, Pathways to Inclusive Higher Education. So IN is the nonprofit that supports inclusive college programs for students with intellectual disabilities across the state of Colorado. So we do not provide the direct services to the students on campus, but we work really closely with our program staff. And so we know what's happening at those programs, how they're run, what they're focused on. So I'm going to share a bit about those just so you can see what are the options for students with intellectual disabilities after K-12. They want to continue to learn about things that they're passionate about and really develop skills to help them be successful as an individual working in a specific field or just thriving in their community. So we'll talk a bit about that. You guys will see contact information on this screen. I'm going to go ahead and send this presentation as well as Adam's presentation to you all in an email along with the recording of this webinar. So don't feel like you have to take down all of the information all at once. This can be a lot to take in. So just want to encourage you that we're going to send you the resources afterwards. And if you have specific questions that come up that don't get addressed today between now and 6 p.m., feel free to contact us directly. We really want to resource you in the specific situation that you are in and make sure we can help you serve students and young adults with intellectual disabilities in your community. So I'll do a brief intro for you, Adam, but Adam will really take over in just a few minutes. So Adam Tucker, he works with the Department of Healthcare Policy and Finance, and he is a Waiver Innovation Unit Supervisor. So essentially that means he's our waiver guru, and I just get to ask him a million questions. And so hopefully you guys will be able to do the same. I want to encourage you throughout our time to use the chat to ask questions. I'll be scanning through that chat as Adam speaks and let him know if there's something pertinent to the topic he's addressing right then and there, or we'll come back during a Q&A session as well. As we're going, I do just ask that we keep our videos and audios muted just because that helps with our, recording of the presentation and just make sure that we can have everybody focused in as best as possible. So a quick picture of who IN is. As I mentioned, we're that nonprofit that supports inclusive higher education. The programs that we support focus on serving students with intellectual and developmental disabilities to help them foster academic growth, social development, career advancement, and independence at the college level. So our vision is really to see students with intellectual disabilities be welcomed on all college campuses and allowed to continue their education and preparation for life. So we really see inclusive higher education as this robust, holistic support to students with intellectual disabilities to help them grow and develop skills in a number of areas in their life. So let me tell you kind of where we're headed from now until 6 o'clock. This is really a threefold intention. So first, I want you guys to just have a brief review of inclusive higher education programs in Colorado and the available supports that are already embedded within them to help students with ID. And then we'll pass it off over to Adam, and he's going to give a pretty broad overview of what the waiver services are and what services are available to individuals with disabilities here in Colorado. Then we're going to focus in on which of those waiver services can specifically help students at the college level. And then we should have a good amount of time for Q&A after that. So really quickly, let me just speak to what our inclusive higher education programs do. What are some of the services and the supports that they already have included within them for students with intellectual disabilities? So they all focus on those 4 pillars: academics, social, career, and independence. At the academic level, this is for students that typically could not enter college or reach college entry criteria. So they're students that don't have to take those ACT, SAT exams, things like that. They're able to receive accommodations and modifications. They're pursuing a certificate in an area of study that they're passionate about. And they're able to choose their area of study and receive tons of supports around that particular emphasis, all based on their career goal. There's social support involved as well. It's fully inclusive. So these students are not taking a special education course on a college campus. They're taking courses alongside their peers. They're going to clubs and activities alongside their neurotypical peers. There's a big emphasis on their career development. So they'll be developing skills for the job force, focusing on resume development, interview practice, and lots of other pieces, including job experiences throughout their times at these programs. So they might do internships, then do job shadows, things like that, and then eventually be in paid employment, and ideally paid employment in their communities by the time that they graduate. And really the piece that we'll probably be camping out on a lot today is that independence piece of these programs, where students have the opportunity to live on college campuses, to live in dorms or apartments, and navigate what that looks like to live independently or alongside neurotypical peers. The supports that they can receive at this level include lots of peer mentor support. So peer mentors are going to guide all of these areas. So those are individuals that are employed by the program, employed by the institution to meet with students one-on-one to help them reach their goals in each of these areas. So that might be academic goal reaching. It might be independent living goal reaching. So if they want to focus on how to do their laundry more consistently, they could meet up with a peer mentor on a regular basis and talk through how they're doing that. Or maybe have a peer mentor go into their dorm room and guide them through that once or twice a month, whatever it might be. The one thing that I do want to focus on is that each of our programs, and I'll share which ones we have here in Colorado, operate slightly differently. So it's really good to reach out to the program that you're particularly interested in to see what are the services that they offer in that arena, in the academic, social, career, or independence arena. It's just good to have an awareness of that. And I'm sure Adam will touch base on why that's important to know as we look at our waiver services as well. And I do want to point out that these programs do not provide 24/7 care or medical care to individuals with those particular needs. So that's really where we want to look at what are some outside services that can support those individuals so that they can pursue inclusive higher education. So these programs are largely supported by peer mentor support, but then there's also going to be directors and staff members at the institution through your typical Monday through Friday 9 to 5 timeframes that can offer support to students. But these programs really encourage natural supports that students learn how to engage with natural guidance across the campus, access their neurotypical peers, and really pursue their goals in that avenue. So I will, as I send out this presentation to you guys, I'm also going to send you a link to our In 101. That's going to give you a deeper dive into what these inclusive higher education programs offer. Great place for you guys to start if you're interested in that. But for now, let me point to the 4 institutions that are offering inclusive higher education here in Colorado. So we have Elevate at Arapahoe Community College, which is in Littleton. That's our commuter campus. So this does not have on-campus living, as it's a community college and no students have that option. So they're there in Littleton. We've got UCCS in Colorado Springs, the Office of Inclusive Services. They have on-campus apartments that are available for students. Then we have Goal at UNC in Greeley, Colorado, and they have on-campus dorm options. And then Regis University in Denver, Colorado, that also has on-campus dorms. So you'll see kind of a breakdown of those schools and the links to their particular websites to find out more about those programs. And I encourage you to do that. You'll see at the bottom, there's a designation between those first 3 and that last one. So I do want to point out that our first 3, ACC, UCCS, and UNC, have all received what we call comprehensive transition and post-secondary program status, which essentially is fancy verbiage to say that they've met a long list of criteria to show that they're fully inclusive, that they're helping students develop the skills necessary for employment in their future and independence in their future. And that CTP status allows students that are enrolled in those programs to access federal financial aid. So they can access grants or work study as they pursue their certificate with those programs. At this point, there is not access to federal loans for students receiving certificate because they're receiving modifications at that level. But still, that CTP status gives these students lots of opportunity to access additional federal support for the programs that they're enrolled in. And then you'll also see that those 3 schools have a comprehensive higher education certificate. So they're all having students reach this agreed upon certificate that is transferable across these schools. So students can pursue a certificate at ACC with modifications and then transfer to UNC if they wish in a normative way. So it's a really robust certificate that helps students develop the skills that they need for their particular area of study. Regis is in the process of getting both of those two pieces set up. Likely that's going to be in place next fall, but it's just important to know that at this point, those are not opportunities at Regis currently. So I encourage you guys to click through and look at these programs, get some more information, and reach out to me directly as needed if you have particular questions about that. But really, you're all here to hear about community services and waivers. So Adam, I would love to pass it off to you. So awesome. I will stop my share and you can go right ahead.
All right, let me see if I can do this.
Fingers crossed.
I usually use Zoom, so sometimes I get a little lost about what I'm actually supposed to do here. So
look at you. Perfect.
Welcome, guys. And I apologize. My normal camera that I use usually sits right in front of me. It broke, so I'm stuck on my laptop one, and that's why I'm kind of not probably going to be looking at directly into the camera tonight. I apologize for that because I need my other screens to do some of this stuff. So, so what I really want to do tonight is, kind of walk through some of the basics around Medicaid to really kind of understand where the waivers sit in there. And I'll explain what a waiver is and all of that kind of stuff. Also explain the different aspects of the support systems that like case management and those and where they fit into this system and how they can be helpful. And then go over a couple of the waivers. I'm not going to go over all the waivers. I'm only going to go over the waivers that really pertain to specifically this group. And I'll explain that a little bit more when we get there. But the goal is that I don't want to have to talk through 10 different waivers. What I really want to do is be able to give you guys the overall kind of 30,000 foot and then really hop into questions and really kind of dig into that. And then the last part of this is a lot of resources and a lot of links and stuff that you guys will be able to access once I get this over and we can get it sent out to you guys. So if that sounds okay, that's where I'm gonna kind of get started here. So, so I always have to do this, or a mission at healthcare policy and financing, and this might be important. So HICPUF is our acronym. So we are different than the Department of Human Services or the Department of Public Health and Environment. We are totally and utterly designed to administrate Medicaid in the state of Colorado. So if it is a Medicaid program, it's administered through us. That doesn't mean that we provide service. It just means that we're the bureaucratic operational entity that does the policy and makes sure people are getting paid and all of that kind of stuff. So at the end of the day, what our goal is to make sure that people have access to the services so that their healthcare is better, that their social outcomes are better, and that we're doing that utilizing best practices that also make sure that we're using taxpayer dollars in the best way possible. That doesn't mean that we're looking to make things as cheap as possible. We're looking at value in the money. That's how we're always see it. Some things are just going to cost more, but if the value is better and the value is justified, that's kind of how we're going to go. So with that, I can get over the bureaucracy part now and just kind of keep moving. So like I was saying, kind of Medicaid waiver basics, kind of how to access, who are some of those points, the waivers in Colorado. And then I also have a couple of slides specifically for this to kind of talk about, and I think really to kind of get to that last point of, okay, let's start identifying some of these services and let's start thinking through this. So we're gonna get into that as well. So, okay, so Medicaid basics. So anytime that you are looking at Medicaid, you really are looking at eligibility around two different kind of pieces. And so, but let me start, sorry, that's not with the slides. Let me start here. So Medicaid was created in 1965. It's really health insurance for folks who don't have access to other forms of health insurance, either through their work or it costs too much to be on the open market, those different types of things. Entitlement programs are the things that we call state plan. So, and I'll explain that here in the next couple of slides, but this is just more of the history. And then all states are given options to participate in how they want to participate within Medicaid. All states have a version of Medicaid. Some have, like Colorado is a Medicaid expansion state. So we really base everything off of financial eligibility, while other states are not considered a Medicaid expansion state. So it really is a lot of flexibility per state. But when we're thinking about it from where you guys are, and you're coming in as a member into Medicaid, you really do have two different tiers of services and two different kind of bundles of how to gain those services. That first one are those what we call mandatory state plan benefits. What that means is those are the entitlement. So as long as you as a Medicaid member are financially eligible to be on Medicaid, that's always the first step, is making sure financially you meet the financial eligibility to be a Medicaid member. Now there's 12.5 different ways to meet that. And so there's lots of different options and lots of different flexibility in how to meet that. We could literally I could spend an entire class, like 6 weeks just on that. So just know that through Peak and through the different places that you access our applications, there's flexibilities in there that it knows about that you may not need to know about. So even if somebody, like as a family, you have a lot of resources, as the new college student going off into the world at 18, they become the head of the household. So even if financially you as a family probably do not meet the criteria to be a Medicaid member, that doesn't mean that the future college student doesn't, because they can become the head of household. Also, we have programs like Medicaid buy-in that allow for folks to access Medicaid and still make income, still kind of move upwardly mobile and those kinds of things. We've really been working on that for a long time. So we have those mandatory state plan benefits, and then there's a set of optional benefits, and that's where we find things like prescription drugs, case management, physical therapy, all of those types of services. Those are all accessible by anybody who has a need to access. So there isn't a specific thing that you have to meet. There isn't a targeting criteria. If you need to go and get a prescription filled, it is something that we have opted into in the state of Colorado, and it's something that you have access to. So where does this all sit? So when we're talking about state plan, that's that bottom piece. That's that piece I was just talking about. But then there's a hierarchy that we get into, because once you get into state plan, you are then able to get access for higher levels of care, including what we're talking about tonight, which is home and community-based waivers. We call them optional benefits, but once you implement them, they stop being optional. Optional in this sense means that the state has some additional flexibilities to ensure that those waivers are meeting the needs of the individuals and the state as a whole. So that's what we mean by optional. Colorado has opted into providing waivers, and that's what we will continue to do. And so let's get it. Any questions so far? Once this clicks, a lot of the Medicaid stuff starts to click. So I just want to make sure there isn't any questions here. I'm not making this too complicated, if that makes sense.
Yeah, Adam, I don't see any questions in the chat, but if anybody has any direct questions you want to ask right now, feel free to unmute.
Yes, please. And guys, I am totally down for people just flat out interrupting me and asking questions. So don't be shy. If something hits you, this stuff is really complicated, and I'm trying to give you guys, that real tight slice so you can understand it. But if you're not understanding something or it clicks into a different question that you have, please just ask, because this is Medicaid's complicated, but we want to make sure that we're explaining it in a way that also fits in with the context in which you guys know Medicaid, if that makes sense. Okay, so
we actually have a hand raised from Anne. Anne, if you want to go ahead.
Hey, Adam, I just had a question. If your child is not on any type of waivers now, but they're at 18, they become head of household. Do you apply on their 18th birthday for Medicaid waivers if they wouldn't qualify under the household?
You know, and actually I would, under Medicaid, so this is kind of, now we're getting in more than nuance. Under Medicaid, you can make the child the head of household before they're 18. So we have ability to, it's not as cut and dry as it is when you're 18, because still some of those family resources are taken into consideration. But we do have access to medically needed services. So basically what I'm saying is that I would contact your case management agency as soon as humanly possible, just to make sure that they know that you and your family actually exist. And you can start talking about what's needed now, if that makes sense. Does that help, Anne?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so home and community-based services are what we call waivers, okay? So HCBS waivers, you're gonna hear them called Medicaid waivers. You're also gonna hear things like SLS and DD and BI. Those are all waivers. That'll make sense here in a second. But when we're talking about home and community-based waivers, home and community-based waivers are specifically designed as an alternative to institutional care. The whole point behind waivers is, when we look at it historically, waivers were implemented to as the evolution away from institutions. And so back 40 years ago, back 50 years ago, most people with specifically intellectual developmental disabilities were supported through institutional care. We have found over time we've evolved away from that and really do believe in community integration. I do think that one of the cool things that's happening now is that we're actually making the next stride in that true community integration. I think that when we started to move people out of institutions and into community, and we created things like group homes and host homes and things like that, some of those models are still kind of institutionalizing people, but they happen to be in a neighborhood. What's cool about what's happening now in our waivers is that we are being mandated to create additional flexibilities. We're being mandated to make sure that people can access the services where they need to access them, and that leads to more independence in the community. So that totally leads into inclusive higher education and those and exactly what we're talking about tonight. So when we're talking about waivers, they are those separate set of services that somebody has to be functionally eligible to receive. So all those state plan services I was just talking about, that's all based on financial. Once you get past that, you get access to all of that. Waivers then take an additional functional eligibility assessment that will then start to help identify which waivers the individual is eligible for, what types of services, who certain provider agencies are, and then also the acuity of the type of service the individual needs. All of that is taken into consideration. And then you as the individual still have the right to choose which waiver you want to be on that best fits you. But that's the eligibility piece for both of these. So know that when you're working on eligibility for Medicaid and for waivers, you're actually working on eligibility from a financial, as well as then when you get to the waivers, as well as a functional. Now, if you're working with some of the case management agencies, they're going to do that at the same time. So you may not see them as separate processes, but just know that from behind the scenes, that's what we're thinking about and looking at. So when we're talking about federal requirements, when it comes to waivers, this is really quick, but I think it's an important piece, is that we have to have cost neutrality. What cost neutrality really is this doesn't mean that everybody who is on a waiver that their care needs to be cheaper than what it would cost for that individual to live in an institution. As an aggregate, as all the waiver members, we do have to prove to the federal government that those waivers as a whole are cheaper than if we took that same cohort of individuals and put them in an institution. The other thing that we have to do is through waivers, we have to make sure that people's health and welfare are protected, that they're not being financially taken advantage of, they're not being abused by the system, or if the individual needs support with broader community kind of safety, that's a fundamental part of the waivers. Oh yeah, and then obviously that the waivers really are designed to ensure that people have a level of care that does not involve the institution. That doesn't mean that people who choose to go into an institution don't have that right to do that. It's our goal to make sure that people have alternative options. And it's also our HICPUF's goal and our mission within the waiver kind of world to make it so that the waivers will just meet anyone's needs and that institutions will are going to be needed less and less and less. I mean, we're always trying to work ourselves out of that institutional work kind of thing. And then the last thing is that this is person-centered, that it's for both what's important to and important for the person, and that those are put into the service plan, and that's how we authorize services. Some of the benefits again is that these are a separate set of more intensive services that can really come and meet you where you want to be. I do think that it's important to know that you can be eligible for multiple waivers, and even over time you can switch between waivers, and that's totally fine, but you can't be on 2 waivers at one time. Again, like this is it. Waivers is this a state? Does the state flexibilities to waivers a lot of times are different in each state? Okay, here we go. So in the state of Colorado, these are more of the waivers that I think we should be kind of focused on tonight. And even within that, we're going to even focus a little bit more around the developmental disability waiver, as well as a supported living services waiver. But these are all of our adult waivers. There's a slide later on that I have listed the children's and adults next to each other. But because we're talking about individuals who are going to be moving out of high school and into college campuses, we really are talking about individuals that are 18 years or older. So that there's yeah, I lost my train of thought. So anyway, that's why I think we should really focus more on the adult waivers tonight. Any questions before we kind of get into what kind of waivers and what they look like and those kinds of things, and what kind of case management is as well?
I think we're good.
Okay, cool. Okay, so like I was saying kind of earlier, is that we are the Department of Healthcare Policy and Finance. So we are the state department that manages the relationship with the federal government, that writes the rule and regulation, that does all of those pieces. We then partner up with our case management agencies. And those case management agencies are the ones that you guys as families and as members will be working more closely with. The case manager is the one who will identify what types of services someone needs. They're going to be the ones who will work with you to identify providers, identify goals, and kind of work through the system and make sure that things are in place at the right time, in the right place, to really make the waivers work for everybody. And then we also have eligibility offices, which are county eligibility offices. And what they are is that's where all the eligibility, especially the financial eligibility aspects, they all go through the county eligibility offices. It is not us at HICPUF who determine if someone is eligible or not. We just set up the rules and the parameters for that eligibility. It is up to the county eligibility offices to use those parameters to then determine where somebody fits within Medicaid. So these are our case management agencies. 24, we have what we call single point agencies, or SEPs. There's 24 of those. We also have what we call community center boards, and there's 20 of those. And then there's 5 private case management agencies. Before I move on from this, you also have to know that there's going to be some pretty significant changes within the next year or so, right around these case management agencies. We are going to we are right in the middle of implementing a new program called conflict-free case management. And basically what that means and what's important for this conversation is that we're going to slam all three of those together. And so we're going to have more universal, what we call case management agencies, and they're not going to be as bifurcated. So the goal is that the hope in the future is that you're not guessing what case management agency you need to engage with. You just go to whatever case management agency is there, and they're going to be able to support you and help you. Because how it is set up right now is that the community center boards, those 20 community center boards, those are going to be this cohort's kind of case management, because they're the ones who oversee the IDD waivers. In the future, we're not going to have that bifurcated between the IDD waivers and the non-IDD waivers. It's just going to be case management as a whole. So I wanted to just mention that to you, but if you're working on it right now, or you're working on it in the next year, reach out to your community center board. They're the place to get started if you haven't started yet. Like I was saying before, this is the waiver eligibility, just kind of broken up a little bit more. Again, that financial, we always start there. That level of care, we have to determine if without the provision of service, this person may end up in an institution. And then the targeting criteria is that last piece that targets the individual and kind of helps separate need and support needs by waiver. So to be eligible for the DD or the SLS waiver, which are two intellectual and developmental disabilities waivers, you have to have been determined disabled before the age of 21. Now that could be anything from Down syndrome to pica to cerebral palsy, but it can also be things like a brain injury that occurred before the age of 21. It's anything that occurs that causes a disability before the age of 21. So there's some more flexibility there, and for the work that you guys are looking at, and for the level of support and flexibility, the SLS and the DD waiver are probably your sweet spots. I'm going to make sure that you guys have access to our waiver charts, because that doesn't mean that everybody needs to go into one of those. There are other waivers that may work on individual circumstances better, and we should keep that in mind. So I'll make sure you guys have resources to look at that. I'm going to kind of skip over this, but the one thing I do want to mention here, I'm not going to get into it again. You guys are going to get all of these slides when I'm done. Is that if you are working with somebody, or if you have a loved one who has a significant disability that you are going to be waiver eligible, the other thing that you guys should really look at is ABLE accounts, and really getting ABLE accounts set up. The beauty about ABLE accounts is that ABLE accounts can work very similar to how a regular bank account works, but it's protected. So you can have assets up to $250,000 in there, and that's broken down by, you can save up to $30,000 a year. And with anything that's in that ABLE account, you're allowed to use that money for anything that is going to support the person whose name is on that ABLE account. And that can be anything from, I'm gonna go out with my friends. I can't buy my friends dinner, but I can use my ABLE account to buy myself dinner. The nice thing about the ABLE account is that it protects the income. So it protects those assets. SSI can't take into consideration the ABLE account, nor can Medicaid when we're looking at eligible. So just a couple of things to think about, especially as we're working with individuals who are going to go to college, and then they're going to go into the world and hopefully have that pathway out of poverty, that access to upward mobility, things like that. We never want folks to, even though I'm not saying this doesn't happen, but we're always trying to work towards a program where we can support people who have these significant needs. And one of the things that we want to support is that upward mobility. So we're always trying to enact and do things that allow for people to make more money while still being able to access our services. So there's always some flexibility we can always talk about and kind of think through. When we talk about
real quick, Adam.
Yeah.
So we just had a question about one of the updates you shared briefly. Christina said, with the changes proposed to case management through redesign, how will that impact a person wanting to attend a college outside of their case management agency catchment area? And will they have to change their case management agency while attending that school? Do you know the answer to that at this point?
I do. So Christine, that is a really, really, really good question. And actually kind of, so I'm going to touch on it now, and then I'm going to touch on it a little bit later. It is really going to be up to you guys. And my advice would be to actually talk with the case manager. You do have the choice to be able to, wherever you're going to be spending most of the time, that's where I would have my case manager. So if you as a student are spending 6 months up in Greeley at UNC, but then spending the rest of that time because of Christmas break, spring break, summer, all of that coming home, especially for like freshman and sophomore, you're probably going to want to keep your case management more close to home, but you can still work with that case manager to authorize services and providers in that college area, if that makes sense. So you have some flexibility in there. I would always kind of err on where, as me as an individual, where am I going to be living most of my time? That's where I'm going to have my case management agency. But I'm going to get into a little bit more detail on that here just a little bit.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, so this is what I mean by targeting criteria. We're talking about age range, diagnosis, injuries. In some cases, we're even talking about region. That is basically going away because we're changing. We used to have a waiver called the spinal cord injury waiver, and that was only available to people living in the Denver metro area. We just changed that last year, and now it's available to anybody across the state. But it's still important to know that region can be one of our targeting criteria. We don't really have a waiver that has that anymore. Again, case management, they're the ones who do the assessment. They're the ones who support with developing the service plan, creating community goals, to navigate the system. They're the ones who help with connecting to providers, all of those types of things. They really are the paid advocate within the system to really try to help members kind of navigate the system as a whole, because it is so complicated. Before we actually dive into the different types of waivers, anything about case management? Anything else? Cool. Okay, let me keep going then. All right, so here are all of the waivers, and I just wanted everybody to actually see all of the waivers. And in reality, the slide deck that I'm actually going to send you guys will have kind of one-pagers on each one of those waivers. I just cut some of those out for our time. And again, focus more on those adult waivers, and specifically the SLS and the DD waivers. So just know that there are other waivers, and there's great ways and great resources to learn more about them. If you can walk away tonight with understanding how you access waivers, who you talk to, and kind of in general what the waivers can do, especially when it comes to inclusive higher education, this is going to be learning or understanding what the different waivers do becomes a lot easier. So one of the things about waivers, and this is across the board for all waivers, and this is what I was talking about, where we are kind of in the next evolution of true community integration when it comes to waivers, is that we have what we call the home community-based final settings rule. The final settings rule just went into effect after about a 7-year implementation period, just went into effect here in the last couple of months. And what it really does is that it codified that person-centered planning process, but it also started to break up this idea that the service dictates the individual's schedule. Instead, it really is fundamentally shifting to that the service needs to meet the individual schedule. And what that means is that if that individual is in, doesn't matter where that individual is, we need to have a service that can meet them where they are and support them where they are. And that's really is the goal of the settings rule is more community integration, more independence, more based on the individual's needs. So again, this is all, we're always focused on more independence, more community integration, all of that, but also that needs to be person-centered so that we're not where somebody's medically fragile, their integration may look a little bit differently than somebody who doesn't have a medical fragile concerns. But the goal of the waivers is to be able to support both of those individuals to really access and achieve what they want in their community. So the first one to really be looking at is the supported living services waiver. The SLS waiver is the other thing. This one is our IDD waiver that is, one, it does not have a wait list. So you can access it and start the process to being able to get into this and starting to receive services just after you kind of work through the process, the planning process and the eligibility process. A lot of these are really, really flexible. So a lot of these different services, so things like assistive technology, behavioral therapies. We also have transition services. And while I'm mentioning transition services, someone transitioning from high school or from home into the dorms would be considered a transition underneath our waivers. And so they would have access to another set of services that are specific to that transition too. So just as something to kind of keep in mind. But really what we're kind of talking about today is those personal care services where probably some personal emergency response, but also within the SLS waiver, things to keep in mind are supported employment, mentorship is here, we have homemaker services, all of those different kind of aspects. So, but one of the other cool things about SLS is that we also have a consumer-directed option within it, and that's called consumer-directed attendant supports and services. What this does is it allows you as either the member or you as a member can choose an authorized representative. So that could be somebody like a parent or somebody that's really trusted to help you with this. But you will get an authorization of what services you are eligible for under the SLS waiver. You'll sit and figure those out for things like personal care. So your personal care is like how you get your shower, homemaker, those kinds of things. But what CDOF really allows you to do within those is it actually allows you to hire, train, fire, set your own wages. You become the employer of record. And you also get additional support with that. So you do get some HR support. So you get somebody else who's going to actually cut the paycheck for you. You're going to get support around how to be an employer, get support around hiring and all of those kinds of things. But with some of these flexibilities, this really is where there could be some flexibilities about maybe a dorm roommate becomes paid staff, so that they, that is their work study, or that when somebody moves off of campus, that they have the ability to kind of dictate who is providing the services. This also gives them that flexibility because you're allowed to then hire somebody in the college area, but then make sure that you have folks hired back at home so that when you go home, those services are already set up and you can use them as you kind of go back and forth. The other waiver that is kind of really specific to this group is that DD waiver. And so the DD waiver is designed to be 24 hours, 7 days a week worth of care. This waiver really is designed for people who are medically fragile, really have a high need for supervision due to behavioral stuff, due to safety stuff, all of that. All of these services can still be utilized on a college campus. And so even if somebody does need support for 24 hours a day, the DD waiver can still come in and do that and can meet the person where they are on campus and still support them in that way. The other piece to the DD waiver as well is that there are some folks, and due to emergency situations and things like that, that may end up on the DD waiver who actually don't need that full 24 hours worth of care. And you may run into a peer, or you yourself may be somebody who finds themselves in that situation. And again, I really want to make sure that no one is afraid to go after the DD waiver if that is the waiver that's going to fit them, because all of a sudden there's a group home benefit. Does that mean I can't live on? No, all of that is still flexible enough for us to figure out and for us to make sure that people can get the support and services that they need while living on campus. And how that really looks is that we have a couple of different models underneath the residential option. Host homes are more like a foster care. I don't think that this might work in some real kind of interesting scenarios within the inclusive higher education. I would say that this is probably going to be the one that that we're going to see probably third or fourth most. But in general, host home is probably the most utilized a residential service across the state. But while people are in the inclusive higher ed or in college, host home's probably not the best fit, but something to keep in mind. The family caregiver and residence piece, that's really where some of that CDOS can really come in, and you guys can still be, as a family member, you guys can be that person when your college student comes home for the summer. You can be that paid caregiver, and that allows for that flexibility and those things. The one caveat I will say there, though, is that you're not allowed to be the person's authorized representative and also get paid. So that would mean that, like, if you're a mom and dad, that would mean that dad, you're the authorized rep while mom is a primary caretaker, or flip that around, or whatever the household makeup is. It could be a brother who's the authorized rep and a sister who is a primary caretaker. I don't know why I just stated that only women can be primary caretakers, because they're not. I apologize for that. No, I'm not trying to say. Anyway, so there's one. But the one that I think is really important here is the individual residence and then the PCA homes. Both of those are really designed to be more live-in caretakers for the individual. And so what that means is that the individual doesn't actually need to have that person living there, but that person needs to be able to access and come over and help the member 24 hours a day, and support them. And that can be due through schedules, but that can also be due to emergencies and different things like that. But the difference between like host home and individual and PCA is who controls the apartment, or who controls the dorm room, or who controls the house that's being lived in. Underneath individual residence and PCA, it is the member's home. So if they don't like a staff member, or they want a staff member to change, it is that staff member that is leaving. It is not the individual. The thing with host homes is that host homes are tied to the caregiver, because the caregiver is also the person who owns the home. And so if there is a problem in that scenario, it's the member who has to move. So in a college scenario, those individual residents and PCAs are just going to fit better for what's going on. And then it gives more control over who's in the dorm, who's in the college campus apartment, those different types of things. So hopefully I'm not getting in too much of the weeds. So stop.
I will. Oh
Yeah.
yeah. I'm just hop in here really quick, Adam. I will point out the importance of, if you guys are pursuing inclusive higher education, filling out applications and doing interviews, just the importance of sharing which waiver your individual or your student is on, and making sure that those conversations are happening early on, because every individual is so different. Their needs are so different. And like I said, there are supports available at those college programs, but they don't necessarily meet every single need. So just an encouragement to open up that conversation if you're pursuing college, whether they're currently enrolled or you're interested in that in the future. Make sure you're chatting with those program staff to see what they can cover and what really is going to be necessary from the waiver side of things.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Any other questions? You just totally set me up for my next section. So
Perfect.
all right. So just some kind of general things to remember as you're starting to kind of walk down this. Waivers and Medicaid, the buzzword is, or the buzz term is, that we are the payer of last resort. So if something else will pay for it, that has to be paid first. And then we catch everything that doesn't get caught by someone else. So what does that mean for what we're talking about today? Is it means that we have to make sure that the services aren't being duplicated. So if you're utilizing peer mentorship in the inclusive higher education program, we need to make sure that and you want to use peer mentorship underneath the waivers, we need to be able to document how they're different. So are you going to use peer mentorship under the waivers to maybe do more activities on the weekends, going to parties, or going out to, I was a nerd and I did political stuff. So, going to social clubs and being on student government and doing that kind of stuff. That's probably more waiver side of peer mentorship, whereas the inclusive higher education may have some other things. And so what you really want to be able to do is make sure, and the case manager should be able to help you with this, is to make sure that there's no duplication of service. The trick to this, though, is that just because you're getting peer mentorship one place doesn't mean it knocks peer mentorship completely out over here. You can sequence services off of each other. You can say, this over here, we're going to use it for this, and this over here, we're going to use it for that. And I know that's stupidly bifurcating bureaucratic stuff, but it kind of is where it is. And depending on kind of how those work, that could still be the same staff member. It just means that they may be filling out two different pay stubs or different things like that. The other thing too to really remember, and especially as the case management kind of changes are occurring, these are not traditional waiver settings, guys. And you guys, even though inclusive higher education has been around for a while, you guys are still sort of the trailblazers. And so I kind of want to give you a heads up that you're probably going to be asked a few more questions by case managers. They're going to be in both college staff as well as anybody in inclusive higher ed can help with this. But just be aware that case managers are probably going to ask more questions. They're going to want to know a little bit more information, and especially because we're talking about somebody living geographically in two different places. And so don't be scared off by that. Just know that that's coming, and stand your ground, basically is what I'm saying. And then finally, for this slide, and we're going to get into this other one, it's really important to realize that Medicaid only pays for services. It doesn't pay for room and board. It doesn't do any of those kinds of things. It provides services to an individual on a fee-for-service basis. So on a 15-minute unit, it provides a service. So what that really actually means is if there's additional accommodations that's needed, especially like in the housing. So let's say somebody has cerebral palsy, they need support, 24 hours a day, and they really do need that live-in caregiver. What can actually happen is that you can request a reasonable accommodation for either that person becoming the roommate, or maybe you moving into a 2-bedroom on-campus apartment, or utilizing a housing voucher, or those different types of resources. I really wanted to point this out because it's important. One of the other kind of crazy things about our system as a whole is just how bifurcated it really is. That you have to come to Medicaid for services, but then you have to go to the housing authority for housing vouchers. So just be aware that even though we try to build a system that is as streamlined as possible, there's still major bifurcations, and there's other aspects beyond the waivers you may want to be thinking about and thinking through. And if there's any kind of questions or weirdness about that, as you guys are thinking about that, I put my email in the chat earlier. I'll do it before we log off again tonight. You can always ask me questions. I know a lot about housing. I used to work in that part of the world too, and have an ability to kind of think about the different aspects of things that that you may be wanting to think about as we're thinking about true independence and community integration.
Yeah, and can I hop in on that too, just from the disability service perspective? So those of you that are pursuing those inclusive higher education programs that I mentioned, those 4 here in Colorado, the best contact to discuss housing accommodations in line with your Medicaid waiver is going to be those program staff directly from Elevate, OIS, Goal, or the global program. If you're a student, because I know a few of our registrants were not interested in inclusive higher education, but are students with disabilities on college campuses pursuing a typical degree, the point person should be the Disability Resource Center office. So those might look a little bit different. Sometimes they're connected at each university and sometimes they're not. So for inclusive higher education programs, I encourage you to make sure you're contacting those program directors specifically. And then for students in a traditional college degree program, make sure they're accessing the disability service office to talk about housing accommodations. And yeah, Adam's background is great in this too. I've also worked in disability services, so I'm all for helping navigate the language around what's reasonable and what's appropriate in the housing level. So
yeah, and to know, and this is something just from personal experience, because I ran into it when I went to college. It's very, very different. The IEP world and the 504 world, when you're actually looking at accommodations, they both work, but they are different. And so really making sure that that a student who's moving away from an IEP, which I had all the way through high school, into a 504, which you get after you leave high school, because 504 is under the American with Disabilities Act. IEPs are part of the part of IDEA, which is our education disability education acts. And so just being aware of that is big, and it doesn't necessarily change the way you advocate. It just changes kind of the level of that, if that makes sense. So yeah, cool. Okay. So initial steps, guys, and number 1 is key. I don't care. Do it tomorrow. If you have somebody who is 5 years old, who you know is probably going to need these services, you're already connected to a case manager. The next time you see that case manager, tell them the goal is that my loved one in 10 years is going to go into inclusive higher education. Just start making that the goal. I'm not saying that if somebody is 17, 18, 19 now, that just do it, just go ahead and do it. Just start bringing this in as part of the conversation. This will really help case managers start to wrap their head around the idea and start to really think about the system and how to support people. It also makes it so that is the expectation, and it's not some crazy off the wall goal. It's not something like, like I want to be an astronaut. It becomes, no, I am going to go to college just like my peers, and really talking about it from that standpoint. And not just talking to the case manager, but talking to everybody that's around, including teachers, doctors, everybody. Because as soon as everybody gets on the same page that this person, that is their trajectory, that's their goal, and that's the way they're moving, the system can start to move with them a lot sooner. And that's just gonna make things a little bit better. The other thing too is explore outside of just the waivers. So the one that I think of the most, and I'm a big advocate for supported employment and for employment and full community integrated employment, is also to explore DVR. DVR has additional resources that could be utilized, and again, I'll make sure this link is in here. Really, it's just about calling your local DVR office and really kind of connecting, seeing what kind of support they can give around training programs and different things like that. Not saying DVR can do everything, but I'm saying that that's a really good alternative place to look for resources that can kind of grow your waiver resources a little bit larger than just what's in the waiver. The other thing that I would do is then I would also start to identify those services that I'm using at home as a member, and really be thinking about why I use those services, what the goal or the outcome is, so that when I'm starting to think about me living in a dorm or living in on-campus housing or something like that, I can kind of start to see how those services are going to be utilized a little bit differently. Because what we want to do is when we start to do the service planning, So we really want to be talking about that this individual is going to be living in multiple places throughout the year, and that here we're going to need certain things, and here we're going to need different things. But let's plan all of that together to make sure that it fits underneath all of the service requirements and service limits and service caps. The other thing that this will also help is then this sets you up to ask those questions to in staff or to campus staff, specifically around, is this going to be a duplication? How far does that peer mentorship work for at UCCS? Because me as a person who wants that peer mentorship, okay, I want it for more than that. So I need to be able to explain that to my case manager so we can sequence those things together and kind of work through. But really the first step is to really identify the need and what services and supports are being utilized to meet that need. Once you kind of have that, the service planning becomes a lot easier as we're thinking about somebody moving away. And then once you kind of do that and you kind of think about that bifurcation, that service planning, you can have multiple goals for different places. So you can have a goal for at home, and you can also have a college, you can have a set of college goals. So all of that can be kind of worked out. But again, it goes through the case manager, and pulling in any advocates for the inclusive higher education program or from campus sooner is going to be welcomed. The one thing too also to understand is that any service planning meeting can be attended by anybody that the client requests to be there. So the case manager is still going to be the one who schedules it. But if you want a college campus representative or an inclusive higher education representative, that can happen. The case manager can work and try to find a time that works, that makes sure that all of those people are available in there for the overall conversation. And that's really the end of my thing. The rest of this is just a lot of resources. So really quick, I'm going to send these out because we have waiver charts that kind of break down the different waivers, what services are there, kind of age groups, all of that kind of stuff. So when you guys get this, that is here. Those ones, the waiver charts are the big people everywhere uses waiver charts, case managers, everybody. So the more you have that as a reference, that's going to be common language and things like that. So it's also really good just to kind of have that as a good starting place. Here's our case manager, current case manager contact stuff. So you guys will get this as well. Here is some information more about buy-in. So we have buy-in for both children and adults. Buy-in program is that program where you can earn more money and you pay a premium to come back into Medicaid. That premium currently is capped at, I think, $100. And so you really have to be making a lot more than the bare bones in Medicaid to even get to that $100. I think most people who use buy-in, it's like right around $2 to $3 a month. And so just so you know, if there is some concern about income or those kinds of things, again, there's flexibility. Here's some web resources, something for you guys just to take a look at when you guys get these. And that really means that I am done, because that's me to answer questions. And here's my contact information.
Awesome. Thank you, Adam. So I did see one comment in our chat from Sally, and Sally, maybe you'll be able to kind of add to this a bit more, but she mentioned that from her experience with her daughter going to college in Washington, she just lists their home address. And I wonder, Sally, does she still receive services at the college campus, or is she only able to receive her waiver services while she's at home in that area?
She does. She receives her support hours over at the college and at home. So they
Awesome.
don't seem to question the difference in distance. And we just leave the home address as the permanent address. And I just always say, it's just like any other college student. They just use that as their permanent address. I just felt like it would get too confusing to try to keep changing it and change case managers to that area and all that.
And Sally, I would in the Colorado system, I would completely agree with that. And yeah, I mean, I think I used, even when I was living at, even in the summer at my college campus, I still had I still remember this because it got me out of jury duty. I still had my permanent address as my parents, and that's totally fine. That is totally fine. That within our system, that you do that here. There's not a problem with that, and I would agree with that. I think that just makes it a lot easier.
Awesome. Well, we want to encourage you guys to, unmute, open your video. We'd love to just chat a little bit more based on your particular questions.
And I'm going to unshare my screen so I can start dropping links in, guys. So
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. If I can figure out how to do that. Okay.
Any questions out there about these waiver services or even higher ed in general? If this has kind of piqued some of those questions, I'm happy to answer that as well.
Hi, this is Cheryl. My daughter is, I don't know how you describe it. I don't know the proper words, but anyway, she has cerebral palsy, but she is just a regular college student.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm assuming that all of this would apply to her similarly. Is that correct?
That is correct. Those waiver services are applicable to anybody, whether they're in inclusive higher ed or not.
And honestly, Cheryl, this is not a reason. Just gonna say this, and hopefully it's not wrong. That duplication, you just have one less entity to worry about that you're duplicating services with. Which could be an advantage. But yeah, no, Cheryl, this is across the board. This is just how it works if you are a waiver member.
Great. Thank you so much. I just want everyone to know, like, I come from a state where the waivers are nothing but a wait list. They're a mirage. So this is like another world. And I just feel so lucky to be here in Colorado now. Thank you so much for all you do.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. We're just so glad that I just have to say, as a bureaucrat, I just love living in a state, and I'm a native, so I like Colorado anyway, but just even in my lifetime, seeing the change and the real desire in the state of Colorado to support people with significant disabilities and really being part of the community, and having that commitment all the way from literally the governor, our just so you guys know, our lieutenant governor in the state of Colorado is an ex-DVR. She has her master's degree in how to support people with significant disabilities and being in the workplace. So we have our deputy governor. I mean, we have our governor thinking about this. We're passing bills all the time to extend and to change these services. So we're also really, really blessed to be living in a state that wants to see this as part of anybody with a disability's life. That this is civil rights, not just a fun thing to do or to make you feel better, but that people actually have a right to these things. And it's great to live here and know that.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I had to hop on my soapbox a little bit.
I love it. I love it. That's okay. So in the meantime, while you were sharing that, Christina asked a question: is a student able to use day program support, so SCC, under the DD waiver to attend college classes, either inclusive higher ed or degree program track? So I'm not sure if you want to speak to that on your end first, Adam, and then I can jump in as needed.
Yeah, sure. So yes and no. If there is not another support, either through ADA and your 504 on college campus or through another program, then if you have either of those, then we're worried about duplication. If you don't have those, then yeah, supported community connections feasibly could come into that. Now, one thing supported community connections could do, that if I'm remembering college correctly, is they may not be able to go and take notes in class, but they could support somebody in going and talking to the teacher after class. They could have support in going to going and working in groups and different things like that. So as long as the school is not mandated to provide it, yes, supported community connections can come in and do it. I also think it's supported community connections that go on and signing up for a frat or sorority, any of those kinds of things. Those are the services you can use.
I do want to ask a clarifying question, Christina, if you're willing to give some more input on that. When you say use day program support, are you referencing like staff members from a day program to provide that service, or what do you mean by that particular part of your question?
Sure, I'll come off mute.
Great.
I work for the Pikes Peak Region Advocacy Agency. Have a lot of families who want to have their loved one attend college, but they need physical assistance with activities of daily living. They need someone to help them potentially take notes, be engaged. And so in trying to figure out how do we get a person the supports they need, can, under the waiver, the day program staff person attend school with the student so that those activities of daily living are covered, supported while they are pursuing their goal.
Great question. Okay, thank you for that clarity. Yeah, so I think I do want to speak to that in the twofold options that you gave us of a typical degree seeking student and then inclusive higher education. So first, under inclusive higher education, so those are those particular programs that are not degree seeking but certificate seeking. Those students that are accepted into those programs are, if they need support in classes to stay engaged or need support with note taking in classes, that is most likely going to be provided by a peer mentor. That is a high priority for those programs just because it's more normative. So it's more natural that a college age peer is going to be in there supporting that student. So that's probably going to be our first step. Within those programs, they have the staffing and resources to offer that. On the other side of things, for students pursuing degree seeking students, that under like accommodations in their disability services office, they're not going to offer an aid like that, so to speak, or kind of a para-educator support. And so that is where somebody from these waivers can go in. The student would have to clearly identify and justify the need for that at the academic level. So that's academics. And then when it comes to the healthcare and like medical support, I think across the board, whether it's inclusive higher education or not, the program staff or the disability services office do not offer that medical care. And so it would absolutely be necessary to have that supported community service come in from the waivers.
Yeah.
Does that help at all? Did that provide clarity, or did that make it more confusing?
No, that absolutely does. And it will just help us to be able to inform families that, yeah, this is a possibility for your
Absolutely.
loved one, even
Yeah.
if they need those type of supports. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think that is really, really the thrust of why we wanted to have this webinar too, is so that everyone sees, whether it's degree seeking or certificate seeking, that if there are limitations medically, physically, cognitively, whatever it might be, that we don't want to take college off the table. We really believe that students, I mean, we've seen with inclusive higher education, over 32 students graduating with intellectual and developmental disabilities that didn't think they could do that before, but they are doing it and they're developing holistically. So yeah, our hope is that you guys all hear that there are ways to navigate supports so that it is at least on the table to address with each individual that you serve.
And with that too, Christina, also, I think that there's lots of nuances in there. And so as an advocate, I would love to just sit with you and just talk through some of those so that you can support the case manager and the families a little bit more with a lot of times, especially with case managers who are new, which we have high turnover. So we have a lot of new case managers. It takes a while to start to learn the nuances of where the flexibility in some of this stuff is. And I guess what I'm really kind of talking about, Christina, is that I wouldn't want to just use supported to community connections for what you're talking about. I'd want to mix it in with homemaker and personal care types of services that can take place not just in the home, but also on campus and in the community. And that will help with budgets, and it'll help with making sure that some of those artificial unit caps can be more fully utilized for exactly what you want. If somebody needs to, if you need help with taking notes or talking to the professor, that's supported community connections. If you need somebody to help you use the restroom, in between classes, that's a personal care kind of thing. And so just having some of those flexibilities is just going to make the waiver work better for folks, even though it feels like you're bifurcating more. So Christy, anybody else, and this includes anybody here, if you have specific situations or whatnot, you're really looking for some of those flexibilities, please reach out to me. I'm happy to sit in. I'm an old case manager. I love doing this stuff. So
Thank you. I would love to chat with you because there are a couple of very specific situations that we have been starting to explore. So I put my email address in the chat.
okay, cool. And I just throw mine back in there too. So I will
Thank you.
steal yours and you have mine.
I have a question. Hi,
Go.
I just want to say first off, I don't know if this is like the 6th or 7th Zoom I've seen and it's starting to click, but you are very clear and I love how you divided everything up and I'm just starting to get more things. So thank you for doing this.
Absolutely.
Could you go over the Health First Colorado buy-in program for the member? Because I have a ID girl and she's reaching the end of high school and I can foresee her. She has high functionality, but she still has a low IQ, but her adoptive score must be off the roof because I can see her having a job, but I think insurance and those kinds of things would be the things that would kill her. So I could see her getting an ABLE account and she's going to make more money than average. And then they get stuck because they can't make more money. But I've heard about this new program that you can buy into insurance so they can make more money. And you're telling me I can put it in an ABLE account up to $250,000. So, and I heard it's only been around for 2 years, this buy-in.
No, so the buy-in's been around as long as we've been an expansion state. So since 2010 and the Obamacare expansion.
Okay.
We've had but what you're noticing is in the last 2 years, there's been an expansion. And just as of January 1, buy-in was included into the DD waiver. So now all waivers include the buy-in.
So she has to be on a waiver to get the buy-in, or I don't understand.
No, she doesn't have to be on it. No, you can get buy-in just to be on Medicaid if that's all she needs. But if she needs things like personal care or supported community connections or any of those kinds of things, she's going to want to look at the waivers to gain access to those additional services, and she can use buy-in to access that as well. Is that
okay? I don't foresee her needing that. What I do foresee her is needing like a mentor to teach her on the job. Maybe I'm looking for that, and I'm working with DVR a little bit. I just put my toe in there, and I'm kind of feeling around. I'm not sure what can be offered in that area, like how to learn a cash register. Like, that's not, huh?
I know this really well. I know this really well. So
okay, great.
Supported employment is that's my passion. So we call that supported employment. And what supported employment is, we have supported employment through both our DD and the SLS waiver. So she's still probably going to want to get on one of the little waivers. She does not have to access any more services than she wants to access. So if all she wants to hop on there, she does have to get one service every 30 days. That's the,
okay.
But that can be a check-in, a phone call. It can only last for 15 minutes, so there's some flexibility there. But if she only wants to get on there and use supported employment, she can absolutely do that. But let me just real quick, for supported employment, DVR has a set of services called, the main ones that you're going to run into and that people are going to utilize is both job development and job coaching. Okay. Job development is really helping somebody learn and getting set up for interviews, setting up resumes, identifying what kind of work that they want to get into, identify what they might be good at, things like that. And so there's some models that are used to really support people in doing that. And then there's this thing called job coaching, which provides you a one-on-one, in most situations, a one-on-one a coach who's going to be there to support you in learning how to do your job, but also fading out. So the goal is that they fade out. That doesn't mean that they go away completely, because they never do, because you still want them there in case somebody needs help with talking to their boss or reporting wages to Social Security or getting your taxes done. Job
Mhm.
coaches can do all of that stuff. And so that's all in the waiver. How we have it set up in Colorado. Colorado is incredibly rare. We're the only state that does this. But what we do is we sequence our services. So what we require is you need to be on the SLS or DD waiver. You need to tell your case manager, I want to go start looking for a job. The case manager then puts a call into the DVR office. They set up as long as there is proof that there was an email, that case manager can authorize supported employment services on the waiver right away that same day. And then you use those until you start working with DVR. DVR only is there with you for about a year, and then you come back to the waiver again. And then you use the waiver for those extended services. So hopefully that
Okay.
makes, so yes, those are there. And the more that we utilize those services, especially things like job development with individuals as they're in college, it really is going to help that long term. You can start planning, you can start doing career planning while the person is still in college, and not even get to the job coaching part until much further down the road. The other thing that we're now talking about this is the other resource that I'm gonna is the Disability Benefit 101. This is a self-service program that's specific. This one that there's one in Washington, Sally, so just Google it. I think there's one in Washington. This one is specific to Colorado. This is a self-service program where you can go in and you can put in different incomes, you can put in different kind of assets and things like that, and it'll pop back out to you. This is how it's going to affect your Social Security. This is how it's going to affect your Medicaid. And also, here are some things that you can do to minimize that risk. So there's going to be articles in here on buy-in. There's going to be articles in here specifically on waivers and how to ask able accounts.
Great.
All of that stuff is on here. And this is literally updated live. So this is the newest information you can access with this.
So it's
stuff.
kind of like an app on a website where you can put in different things and see what gets affected.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
So I just have to Google Disability Development 101.
I actually just threw the link in
Oh,
the
all right. Yeah, there it is. Thank you. Okay.
I will put that in the email. So I'm going to give you guys these slides are recorded video and then just all of our linked resources. That could be
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. And I will speak to some of those just on the inclusive higher education front. So there is a lot of that career preparation and job preparation during the time that they're enrolled in these programs. So that's specifically for that inclusive higher education program. They're at most of these institutions, they have an employment coordinator that's working with these students closely, and there's some partnership with DVR. So that could be shared in different settings, but I just wanted to point out that those supports can happen at the college level as well. Cass,
Okay,
did you
great.
want to add to that?
Yeah, why don't you just talk, Pat?
Go for it.
Yes, a question regarding what he was just talking about, Disability 101 and all that information. Where do we find that?
I put the link in there in the chat, but it really is just co.db101.org. That's it.
See it now. I see it.
Thank you.
And then also, so you guys know, DB101 is really designed as the beginning part of that benefits planning. There are actual professionals who they like go to Dartmouth and these really highfalutin places, and they actually know Medicaid and Social Security better than Medicaid and Social Security does. They also know about all the different programs. These folks are called benefits planners. DVR offers them, as well as starting in July, they are going to also be a service in the DD and the SLS waiver under the Medicaid benefit. So it's good to start with DB 101, but always remember, if you need more of that information and you need more of that, really making sure there's going to be access to professionals who specifically focusing on this stuff. And they're the ones who can help you also if you got a letter in the mail saying that you had an overpayment from Social Security. They can help you kind of figure out what's going on there. They can do things like make sure that you're signed up for PATH plans and ABLE accounts and all of that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah, I
Wonderful.
put that, hi, my name's Karina. I put that in the chat. I work with the SWAP program in Mapleton, which is a partnership with DVR, and a bunch of us have gotten trained as WIPSEs, like work incentive practitioners. But yeah, it's so important to get people connected with DVR, and then they can get connected with a benefits counselor and really help explain all of that. There's this idea that if I go to work, my benefits just disappear, and it's really not like that. There are so many options.
Absolutely. Thank you, Karina. I appreciate that. Wonderful. Any other questions with our remaining few minutes we have left? Awesome. All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much, Adam. We really appreciate all the information you shared, but also your passion for this. I think it's really important and beneficial for families and, students to know that there are lots of resources. And I feel like oftentimes when I meet with families, it can feel so overwhelming to navigate them. So our hope today is that you have an email address so you can reach out to Adam with questions, our faces and our names, so that you can, connect with us and we can help resource you as needed. We really believe in individuals with intellectual disabilities and believe that they can do amazing things in our communities, and we just want to support them as needed. So as I mentioned, all of this information will be coming your way by tomorrow morning. And if you have any follow-up questions, you guys can reach out directly.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay warm, everybody.
Yes.
Okay, you
Yes.
too. Thank you now.